The Israeli case, you know, supposedly the God of the Hebrews is on their side, but I'm not buying it. Maybe Allah got into the courtroom, because right from the beginning, the Israeli case did not go well with their barrister losing his papers.
The court was prepared to consider not only the question of the plausibility of rights.
This is the second time this happened to him, by the way.
Well,
I think you may have sang over it, but he said, "Someone shuffled my papers." He accused the saboteur.
The question of
Hamas! Hamas!
Lock the doors. All right, nobody's leaving until we figure out who's the Hamas agent in here.
Yeah, so that just seems to me to be an act of God, in my opinion. If I were a religious man, I would take that as a sign that God's not on your side.
I mean, the only way that could get any better is if his parking validation got lost as well.
You know, we'll have to reach out to our contacts at the AP to find out.
Listen, nothing pisses off an overzealous Jew like having to pay for parking. So that would really be a bridge too far. Talk about your day not getting any better.
So this is Tal Becker. Okay, so I'm gonna let you all in on something. When everybody's rushing against a deadline, they are not able to gather all the information. So because this just happened today, he was the only one I could find the name for. I think most of the reporters, they were up against a deadline. They didn't have time to find out the names of all these people. So there's a woman whose videos are circulating, but I wasn't able to find her name before showtime. But this is Tal Becker, who first he started off talking essentially about how Israel was one of the first to eagerly sign on to the genocide conventions, and what a perversion of the term genocide, applying it in this case, is. How basically these are just the realities of war, which you've heard before from the Zionists, that this is just war. War is hell. They're using a war is hell defense to a certain extent. But let's hear what else he had to say.
If there are any provisional measures that should appropriately be indicated here, they are indeed with respect to South Africa. It is a matter of public record that South Africa enjoys close relations with Hamas, despite its formal recognition as a terrorist organization by numerous states across the world.
It is well known that the United States enjoys a close relationship with Israel, in spite of its reputation as a terrorist organization throughout the world. I fixed it for you.
See how easy that was?
These relations have continued unabated even after the October 7th atrocities. South Africa has long hosted and celebrated its ties with Hamas figures, including a senior Hamas delegation that incredibly visited the country for a, quote, solidarity gathering just weeks after the massacre. In justifying instituting proceedings, South Africa makes much of its obligations under the Genocide Convention. It seems fitting then that it be instructed to comply with those obligations itself, to end its own language of delegitimization of Israel's existence, end its support for Hamas, and use its influence with this organization so that Hamas permanently ends its campaign of genocidal terror.
Okay. When you find yourself on the receiving end of an apartheid accusation from fucking South Africa, it may be time to reevaluate your moral position. Keaton, anything?
Yeah, I mean, that's about all you could say to that. I mean, you don't even know how to respond to that. I almost feel like the best way to make this point is just to show these videos side by side. Leave it up to you. If you can find it in
Somebody
yourself
did that, actually,
to take that seriously, then I don't think you're capable of being convinced of anything. I mean, and this was the big worry of mine in the days following October 7th. I didn't think that the Palestinian side would win the PR war the way it is. I just didn't think so. When we came on this show shortly after, and I made the point. You can't change the mind of a biased jury, a dyed-in-the-wool bigoted jury. It didn't matter what Atticus Finch said to that jury; he was going to lose no matter what.
Right. He
understood that, and he felt he had to make those points anyway, because he just had to fight the right fight, because it was the right thing to do. Not to make any grandiose literary comparisons, but I felt like I was in those shoes myself when we went on the air, because you just feel like it's an unwinnable argument at the beginning of this, because you see how hegemonic that narrative is when it comes from on high. I'm very surprised, pleasantly surprised, by how receptive the general public has been to these arguments. And on the one hand, you could say that's an indictment of my expectations, right? It's a testament to my cynicism. But I just thought this was an unwinnable argument because I thought the jury was just rigged and too biased and too brainwashed. But as you see these clips, just put them side by side, they make the argument for you. I mean, it's hard to even respond to that. What an utter load of absolute nonsense, completely detached from the reality of the last, 3 months.
Yeah, they are charmers, that's for sure. So they go on to continue to make their case such as it is.
South Africa stated that the IDF gave 24 hours notice to civilians in northern Gaza to evacuate. In fact, the IDF urged civilians to evacuate to southern Gaza for over 3 weeks before it started its ground operation. 3 weeks that provided Hamas with advanced knowledge of where and when the IDF would be operating. This 3-week period for temporary evacuation is a matter of common knowledge, and the applicant's misrepresentation of this fact is at best an unfamiliarity with the events, and at worst, a desire to tailor its story to a pre-existing narrative.
Yeah. So what about bombing the roads that you told them to take there and then bombing the places that they went? Not mentioning that. South Africa did talk about that in their case. In another
if
section.
I could just make 2 quick points. Number one, the order to evacuate is in violation of international law. That's not me saying that. We played video of UN human rights expert Francesca Albanese saying that to a crowd. The order to displace yourself, especially when you multiply that order to the tune of now, 1.8 million people, that in alone is a violation of international law. And I would argue pretty easily, I think, that demonstrates genocidal intent. Number one. Number two, if you're warning Hamas in advance of the bombing, does that not give away that your goal is not to eradicate Hamas, but to claim the land? To ethnically cleanse the land? Right. Is that not tantamount to genocide? I mean, are you serious? Are you serious? It's absurd. The ease with which you could just knock down these arguments one by one. Maybe they should have had the Epstein guy there. What's his name? Alan Dershowitz. I guess he couldn't make it at the last minute because his name was mentioned in those documents. But maybe he'd have been better than this. He'd have been better than this. At least he's the A team.
I don't know that anybody could have really made this case, because how do you make it? There are other sections. I couldn't clip everything, but there were other places they're trying to argue that they have no obligation to open their borders to let aid in. It's just incredible, because what are you going to say? What are you going to say to images of mass graves and entire towns gone? And how are you going to argue against what the South African team effectively put up as entire family lines? Not families, family lines are going to be wiped out. How do you respond to that? So
no, they're putting up videos. I saw the IDF tweeted out a video today of crosshairs from some sort of aircraft with dialogue over it don't shoot. There's children there. Hold your fire. First of all, I'm not saying that's doctored. I'm saying given their track record, I think it's plausible that that's doctored, given the amount of doctored evidence that has come out of Israel. Number two, where was that video before? That video surfaces now that you're on trial. Don't you think you may have wanted to make that point beforehand? That leads me to question the authenticity of that video. Number three, that would be what we would call, and I'm not a lawyer, but I believe lawyers would call that anecdotal evidence, right? You have one example of a supposed pilot saying, hold your fire, there's kids there. They're literally about to blow up a soccer field, and they say, wait a minute, don't do it, there's kids there. Okay, third of all, what are you blowing up a soccer field for? Why?
Why was that even on the menu?
It's an outdoor venue. You could see if there's a tunnel opening right from the air.
Right.
What the fuck you blowing up a soccer field for?
Well, they had a conference. They said, listen, can we find any radio transmissions from someone who's not a psychopath? We must have one pilot who's not a psychopath. And they found this guy. All right, so here she's
Juliana Margulies and Mike Rappaport act out a scene, and then they just overdub the dialogue.
All right, so
don't shoot, there's kids there. All right, let's take that again. Let's take a little less New York,
a little less New York Jew.
Yo, there's fucking kids on the soccer field. What you doing, bro? All right,
I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed for Israel. So here she goes on to deny bombing hospitals.
Hospitals have not been bombed. Rather, the IDF sends soldiers to search and dismantle.
Rather, they have been remodeled. They have been remodeled. We have repainted. It was very drab in there. It was olive walls. We sent the IDF in there with some nice eggshell.
Military infrastructure, reducing damage and disruption. Indeed, the tunnel that sat directly under the main building in Shifa Hospital was exploded without damaging the building above. The IDF then withdrew from the hospital.
Okay, so don't believe your lying eyes. Believe the IDF. No, they didn't bomb any hospitals, apparently. Anything, Keaton?
Well, 169 healthcare centers have been bombed as of the last count that I've heard. So that would contradict that claim.
They were just putting in a skylight.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So Israel not making a very good case of it, but as everybody knows, these decisions are affected by politics. The ICJ is in deliberations now. From what I understand, first they make a decision regarding whether actions should be taken to stop Israel's actions. Now, I don't know what they would do to actually stop them. Orders that they'll probably ignore, I would imagine.
Yes.
And then there's a separate decision ruling whether there is genocidal intent, which it seems is the crux of the matter. Is the intent genocidal? It seems to me the intent should kind of be beside the point if it's not an accident, right? I mean, if you're actively bombing people, it doesn't really matter if you think you're doing genocide, if you're doing genocide. But I get the impression that's the legal standard. Again, we're not lawyers. We're a couple of working schmucks. But
shit talkers.
Couple of shit talkers, shit posters turned shit talkers.
Right. Exactly,
But it seems to me that shouldn't matter. But I think the legal standard it does.
Yeah, and I can't imagine it doesn't go their way. I mean, I don't see how.
Well, what do you have? You have France, China, Russia. Who else has a vote on that board?
Well, we're on the board.
Well, you know how we're voting.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a question.
Come see us do a live stand-up show. We'll be in Venice, California, Palmdale, California, Omaha, Des Moines, Milwaukee, Lansing, Bend, Oregon, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, Boston, Massachusetts, and we're going to Europe. Do you live in Europe? We're going to be there. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all those tickets.